Welcome to Running for Real, a global community with a shared love and curiosity for running. Together we reconnect with the reasons why we love to run and discover ways it helps us become better people. Whether it's the quiet moments of a morning run while the rest of the world still sleeps, or befriending the strangers next to you at the start line of a race. We are here to connect with others who see running as the common thread that weaves our lives together. Come join me, Tina Muir, as I talk with people from all walks of life, united by a love of running. Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 273 of the Running for Real podcast. Thank you for being here today. I am excited you are here. And as you are listening to this, if you listen to this on the day it comes out or the day after, I will be in New York City getting ready to run the New York City Marathon this weekend. Maria, who is on our team, is also running it. This is her first marathon, so be sure to wish her some luck in that. And if you are not going to be there this weekend, you can join in with the Running for Real Watchathon. There is going to be a lot of buzz going on within our community. You'll get to chat with other runners, get to discuss. And this is not just going to be about who's winning the race, the elite athletes, but talking about the rest of the community. If you are running this weekend, make sure you let us know what your bib number is so the community can track you. And if you are not, you can just be a part of the fun. And I'm even thinking about doing a Facebook Live or a social media live of some kind from the start line so that you can really feel that energy and see what it is like. And then you can just watch the event with the community, really bringing us together at this time where not everyone can be in person enjoying the event. So be sure you look up the NYC Watchathon that Running for Real is putting on. There will be lots of links in the show notes for you to go check that out. There's also going to be giveaways and other fun stuff going on that day. So I'll put links there in the show notes. But today, let's get on to our episode. I am excited. We have Sonya Looney on the show, and she is one of the world's best endurance mountain bikers. She's a keynote speaker, a TEDx speaker, and the host of the Sonya Looney Show. She is a professional mountain biker, but actually is also a runner too. And we get to talk about the differences there, the things that she has learned. She's raced in 25 plus countries around the world, what those things have taught her. And we just talk about different elements of identity and just learning and growing. I think this is going to be a powerful episode if you love to look into ways that you can grow and evolve as a human throughout different periods of life. Sonya is a really big fan of psychology, learning mindfulness techniques, and she has a lot to say on that as well. So without any further ado, let's go hear from one of our sponsors and get right to this episode with Sonya Looney. Thank you to Tracksmith for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast and for being such a good supporter and partner to Running for Real as a whole. Now, Tracksmith, as you likely know, is an independent running brand fueled by a deep love of the sport. They know that together the running community has the power to drive positive change, and it inspired them to rethink about how they work with their partners to show up for others. I'm really excited and proud that we are going to be using our sponsorship, our support with Tracksmith in a new way to support another group that really is doing some amazing work. So 5% of all sales made by Running for Real listeners will go to support Runners for Public Lands, which is a 501c3 non-profit environmental organization dedicated to environmental justice, advocacy, and conservation. Now, you can use code TINA15 to participate, and you will also receive free shipping on your entire order. And you also, if you go to the link tracksmith.com/collections/running-for-real, I will also put a link in the show notes. I know it can be hard to remember long links like that. You will see all the information about what I just told you there, and also some of my favorite picks. I am loving the Brighton base layer and especially the new colors they have it in. And as always, I am a big fan of the Speed Session shorts. So you can go to tracksmith.com to learn more. I will find the links in the show notes to go get yourself that special offer that is going to support Runners for Public Lands. Thank you again to Tracksmith for sponsoring and supporting Running for Real. Sonya, thank you so much for joining me today on the Running for Real podcast. I'm excited you're here.
Well, as an avid listener of your podcast, I'm really excited to be here.
Well, that's a nice compliment. And this is going to be fun. I don't think I've ever had anyone who was a mountain biker before. I'm trying to think. Don't think so. Definitely, you don't really maybe see that crossover too often of mountain biker and runner. And I would love to know within the mountain biking community to start with, before we go into some of the accolades that you've done, is that typical? Do mountain bikers tend to be, I'm a mountain biker, we don't mess with those runners out there, especially because as a trail runner now, we tend to like bash a little bit, right? Like, because you're bombing down the hill and we're like plodding along and get in your way. Are we supposed to be enemies?
I don't think so. I think that a lot of cyclists think running is really hard. So they're like, oh, running, why would you run when you can ride a bike? Because on a bike, you could just coast downhill. You don't actually have to run and sometimes trip and fall down.
What about the uphill? Because it's way harder to ride a bike up a hill than it is run.
I don't know if I agree with that. Well, today I was out for a trail run and I ran the same route that I rode my bike on yesterday. And I thought, wow, like I rode my bike up this, like that's pretty awesome. But then there's days where I'm running, and because you don't have to push a machine uphill, because a bike can weigh anywhere, I mean, depending on what type of bike you're riding, anywhere from like 21 to 35 pounds. So you have to actually carry that extra weight uphill and push against resistance. So I actually think that running uphill is easier than riding a bike uphill.
Oh, no, that's what I mean. Oh, yeah. Biking is harder uphill.
Yeah, biking is harder uphill. Yeah.
So when you say that like cyclists, mountain bikers, do you say cyclists or mountain bikers?
I think like people that ride road bikes and gravel bikes call themselves cyclists. But mountain bikers probably call themselves mountain bikers, but it's kind of all the same thing.
Okay. But yeah, so I would think that when people say that running is hard, it's so much harder to ride a bike up a hill. So I feel like the benefit you get from going down faster, surely that's got to be outweighed by how hard it is to ride up.
I don't know. You see, I like both sports. I think people specifically probably think of road running, or maybe people only ride a bike. And when you only ride a bike, whenever you even go out for a hike, you get sore. So running would be really almost damaging to your body if you're not used to it.
Okay. Love it. All right. So you are not just any old mountain biker. You are one of the world's best endurance bikers. Also a keynote speaker, a TEDx speaker, host of the Sonya Looney Show. You have a son, and I'm going to dive into some of those, and a husband. I'm going to dive into some of those. But when we say about endurance mountain biking, for someone who hasn't heard of that term before, what does that mean?
Well, I'm guessing a lot of the people listening are really familiar with running. So it'd be kind of like being an ultra trail runner. So some of my races are like 24 hours. Some of them are multi-days. And I know there's some multi-day trail running races. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of similar to that. So I would be like an ultra runner in the mountain bike space. So my races are usually 50 to 100 miles. A 100-mile mountain bike race, it really depends on the terrain. If there's a lot of dirt road or if there's a lot of trail, but it could take anywhere from 6.5 to 9 hours to do a 100-mile mountain bike race. 24-hour race is takes 24 hours to do the race. And then there's things that are even longer than that, where it's like bike packing, where there is no like break. So it's at the starting point. Like there's one that's called the Tour Divide that goes from Canada to Mexico, and the start line is in Canada. I have a friend who's done that. And the finish line's in Mexico, and you get to choose how much you want to stop and sleep. And I don't do that kind of thing. Not at the moment anyway, but I love the ultra endurance stuff just because I feel like you really get to know who you are as a person, and you have a lot of time out there, and it's so mental, and the range of emotions that you experience in the course of a day is so diverse, and you wouldn't necessarily feel those in your daily life. So I really love that feeling. And also I love the adventure aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. I have to say that mountain biking, I haven't done it in a long time, but it is something that when I reflect on like my teenage years, the few times I did it, it was such a rush, like way more than running. Was so much fun to take on these challenging courses and to be bouncing around, and I don't know, it just felt really exciting. So I do love that aspect of it, and it's interesting that like you said, it is kind of like ultra running, but then it can be either way in terms of, you said it could be as short as 6 hours for 100 miles, whereas no no one can run 100 miles in 6 hours, but then you also do the 24-hour long ones. And how did you get to that point where you were testing this out? Like, how did you discover that like the endurance mountain biking was going to be for you?
Really just curiosity. And I'm not going to say it was burnout, but just a plateau that seemingly wouldn't end. Because I started in the Olympic distance mountain bike racing, which is cross country. And that would be similar to maybe a little bit like a 10K to a half marathon in running. So Olympic distance mountain bike race would be, in terms of time, like an hour to an hour and a half. So really short, really high intensity. And I did that for a long time. And I wasn't terrible at it, but I also wasn't one of the best at it. And I realized that I just really wanted to see more places. I wanted to ride my bike. I wanted the race courses to be longer. I wanted more adventure. So I thought, well, I'll just go give this endurance thing a try so I can, like, some of the 100-mile loops is actually a 100-mile loop, or some of them are like 3 different loops. And it gave me the opportunity to just see way more of an area. And that's why I started riding my bike in the first place. And then I just happened to be good at it. So that was kind of motivating to keep going.
Yeah, I love that. So when you say that, you said earlier about you really love it because you get to discover who you are. And I can't remember the exact wording you used, but you really get to spend that time with yourself. To most of us who, I haven't done an ultra yet. I'm intending on doing one in a few months' time. But like, we hear ultra runners or ultra cyclists, ultra mountain bikers say this quite a lot in terms of that's one of the benefits. But to a lot of people, that's one of the things that is most terrifying, because what am I going to tell myself? Like, you hear about going to the deepest depths of your soul. How could that ever be a good thing? So tell us about like what you mean by that and why that's one of the bits you love.
Well, it's because you learn that you have a choice in that moment. Like there's going to be moment or many moments over the course of an event, and even in other things in your life where you're like, this really sucks, or this is really hard, or I don't know how I'm going to keep going. And I'm sure that people listening have felt that way in other things. And then you get to decide what you do next. And some people do give up, and you learn over time that giving up makes you give up more. And you learn over time that, if I can just push through this thing safely, there are times where you do need to give up, but if I can safely push through this thing, then that builds my confidence and my self-belief for the next time. So that if I think back to that hard thing that I did and then I got through, and then another hard thing comes up, you can remember that. And then you just keep going and going. So that's one way to look at it. And another way to look at it is, I think there's different personality types, right? There's certain people that really are honest with themselves. They like to take responsibility for themselves so that they can learn. And there's others that are a little bit too nervous to maybe lift up the hood or start lifting up rocks. But I find that the more that you get to know yourself, and the more you are able to be your own friend, and also the more that you can, it takes work to learn how to be more compassionate towards yourself, but the more opportunities that you have to do that, the better that gets too.
I love that. Yeah, that's so true. So then, I know you're coming from mountain biking, but as you do run as well yourself, would you say it's better for someone to kind of dive in at the deep end of things in terms of these endurance events, or take your time and ease your way up?
For most people, I would actually say start at the edge of your comfort zone, because finding a just manageable challenge is the best way to stay motivated and also the best way to build confidence. And I'm really interested in getting into ultra running as well. And I'm not going to just sign up for a 100-miler or a 50-miler. I'm going to work my way up, because I know that it's really important to build that experience, so that whenever it does get hard, I'll remember how to get through that. And I'll also learn what my body is going to be doing, because your body...
Yeah.
Even from race to race, if you're a well-seasoned racer in whatever activity it is that you do, your body still can be different.
Yes, so true. You mentioned there about, working through hard moments. On your website, one of the main things it says in caps is, you can do hard things. I'll teach you how. I would love to know, for the listeners and me, if we can do hard things, what do you want to tell us?
Well, the first thing that I would talk about is how to train optimism. And optimism isn't, just blindly thinking that everything's going to be fine and ignoring all the difficult things. Optimism is accepting the difficult things as they come up, but knowing that with effort and maybe a little bit of grit, that they can get even better. And that, like success is not a straight line and you're not going to feel happy and cheerful all the time, but that overall the trend line can be something really good. And there's so much interesting research in positive psychology out there with exercises and things that you can do with self-talk and how you explain a situation to yourself that's happening. And you can train that. You can train your mind to be more optimistic. So that would be where I would say is a good place to start. But you also need to have the awareness of what those thoughts are. Because if you don't know that you're going down the rabbit hole of these negative thoughts, or maybe even just trying to block out the negative thoughts, then it's really hard to start working on them.
Is that something that you have learned through your racing, or is it something you've always been interested in and have applied to your racing?
It was sort of something that got reverse engineered because I started doing these mentorship talks kind of around the US when I was traveling for work at the time, because I just wanted to help people who were interested in mountain biking. And the talks weren't about mindset. The talks were about like, what tire do you choose? And how do you change a flat tire? Or how do you pick an event? And how do you train? Like those types of things. But then people started noticing the types of events that I was doing. And I was doing 7-day races in third world countries around the world. And people wanted to know about those. And they would ask me questions like, well, how did you have the courage to do that? Or how did you not give up when it got really hard? And I started asking myself, well, I don't really know how that happened. So I started trying to reverse engineer how I was doing it. And I came across, the mindfulness field, and I came across the positive psychology field. And I was able to reverse engineer those things. And then because I was able to identify what I was doing and also what I wasn't doing well, I've been able to work on that too. So it's kind of a moving target. It's always something that you have to work on. It's not like, oh, I just worked on it, or I did this one event and now I'm good. It's something that's a life practice.
Did you, what you said, you reversed into it and figured out what you did, but did someone teach you those things growing up in some other field or some other way? Or do you think these were, where did you pick them up?
I honestly think I picked them up just from curiosity and reading a book, because growing up, I was really hard on myself. When I was a new pro, I would cry through my races because I wasn't doing well. Like I was used to being good at everything my whole life. And and I was able to, because I started as a runner before I became a cyclist, I had an aerobic background. So I advanced really quickly as a cyclist, but I wasn't ready to deal with that type of pressure and, to be faced with not doing well. So I literally would dream of stabbing holes in my tires and of getting lost and not finishing because I was so embarrassed about my results. And it was actually going to yoga and learning really about self-compassion and self-acceptance through some of these instructors that kind of turned the light on for me. And I realized that, wow, I'm really worried about what other people think all the time. And I'm defining my happiness based on that. And I started just doing some internal work, and I kind of got into reading self-help books and things like that. And that's how I came across some of these ideas initially. And then I was able to say, okay, this is the category or the author or the researcher that I'm really interested in. And that started opening doors to more curious endeavors.
Oh, so interesting. And I am totally with you, as you probably know, in terms of loving all that stuff as well. And really taking an interest in, what we can do for growth, how we can continue to use these methods to get the most out of ourselves, but also to enjoy sport. It's funny when you were saying about holes in your tires, like I've talked a lot. I haven't heard anyone say a similar thing. And actually, when I bring this up to a lot of other professional runners, they kind of like, like as if they're like, I don't know what that is, but I would do the same thing. Like, I wonder if I start limping right now, in about 100 meters, I can drop off and then people will say, oh yeah, that girl was limping, and I would think about things like that, like, or like, oh, maybe I'll just say that my stomach was really upset and, it was really hurting me and I thought it was my appendix or something, like It's so sad that, as you said, that fear of other people's opinions, and I'm sure you had the same thing of like feeling like everyone in the world was waiting, like sitting at their computer, like waiting for your results so they could be like, ha ha, she failed. And I feel so sad for myself now that I felt that way. And while I have learned that most recreational runners don't have that almost like paralyzing fear of other people looking at their results, they do have an incredibly high standard of what they expect of themselves and really get very nervous. So based on what you have learned with this stuff and what you have been through yourself, what would you say to someone listening who does tend to get really nervous? And it's not about their results, but it's more about, I don't want to let people down who have given up their time for me, or people who are I want to do my best for them.
Yeah, I still kind of struggle with this, but the things that I focus on is that the outcome isn't the most important thing about what you're doing. And I'm sure people listening to this have heard, you really need to be focused on your daily actions and your daily behaviors and your process, and less on what the outcome is, because you're not entitled to the outcome. Like, you might think, I deserve to win, or I deserve this, but so does everybody else out there that's working just as hard as you, or maybe even harder than you. So really, it's about being proud of your effort at the end of the day. And if I'm supporting somebody, if I'm on the other side of things, if someone just goes out and they do their best, regardless of what that outcome is, like, I'm going to love them and be proud of them no matter what. And if somebody is looking at me and they were supporting me initially and they are not proud of me, even though I did my best and even though it wasn't number one, that's probably not a person I want in my corner. But the hardest thing is our internal expectations. Like, there is the expectations of others, but what does it mean about myself? If I put in all this work, I quote, sacrifice, whatever, and I come up short, what does that mean? Does that mean that I should give up? Does that mean that I'm never going to be good enough? And it's believing that there's going to be growth and that you have to stay the course, and that there are going to be days or months or even years where you're not going to be progressing. And as long as you're still finding joy in what you're doing and you're still able to find meaning in what you're doing, I think that it's good to keep going. But there are times where you have to consider, like, is this something that I should keep doing? And I don't really have the answer to when you should change your path. And it's something I ask myself sometimes, like, when should I change my path? But I really think it comes down to, am I finding meaning and joy most of the time, or even some of the time? And is this aligning with what my values are?
So true. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it is okay to, if you need to try something different for a while, or to, even if that is still, for someone listening, still running, but maybe trying a different distance. But even if it is trying a different sport or moving to some time away, and with myself, I took some time away, and like now I think about it, how I used to dread so many of my runs, and now I genuinely like look forward to getting out the door each day, and not for like, so I can look at my pace. I have no idea what that is 95% of the time, but just to do it. And had I not taken that step away, I would never be here right now. So I appreciate you saying that. On the note of related to this, there's a lot that is out of control right now. There's a lot of things that we can't see the future. We don't know what the future of meetings and races and events is going to look like. Now, you've learned a lot about that through your racing and through your travel, especially to, as you mentioned, 25 countries around the world, like Mongolia, Haiti, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Brazil, Colombia, New Zealand. Let's talk a little bit about anyone who is feeling out of control, is feeling just overwhelmed because everything is so difficult right now, with just an inability to know what's coming.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in life, there are times where big picture thinking is really, really helpful. But when there's lots of uncertainty and lots of not knowing what the future is going to hold, thinking big picture might actually cause a lot of anxiety. So it's really, like, I think personally, looking more on a smaller scale and looking closer to the people around you can help take away some of that feeling. Because, like, if you're looking at social media and the news all the time and what everybody else is doing, and wondering like what a year or two is going to be like, when you really don't know, that's going to be really hard. But honestly, we never really know what a year or two is going to be like. We make assumptions based on the current data that we have. And right now, there's been some new data in the last 18 months that have been really challenging for us. But really kind of going back to your core, like who are the people that you can spend time with? Who are the people that you talk to regularly? What are the activities that you can engage in regularly that bring you joy? That way, whenever you have the opportunity to look at the big picture, you have a strong foundation that brings you, in some ways, fulfillment in your life without needing the big picture.
That's so true. And then what about, do you ever think, I mean, I'm sure this has come to you, but the way things are in the US, in Canada, in the UK, we have everything controlled. We know how things work. We as athletes are very driven and controlling, know what we want it this way. But I'm sure a lot of those countries that you've been to have taught you that A, not everyone in the world lives like that, and it's not necessarily better or worse. But B, not having control over everything isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, there's so many things that you can't control. Like you hear control the controllables, but also I think it's like, what can you let go of? And yeah, like if you're trying to control everything that you can't control, that's going to cause a lot of anxiety. Like fear plus uncertainty equals anxiety. And if you can really just try to say, okay, like, am I actually in control of this thing? And there's only a few things that you can control. You can control your attitude, you can control your effort, and you can control your actions. And those things aren't going to amount necessarily all the time to a perfect outcome.
No, I appreciate that. So what else did competing in some of these countries that I would imagine most people listening haven't had the opportunity to travel to, some of those ones I mentioned, what did that teach you?
I've learned that you don't really need that much to be happy. A lot of these places, a lot of these people, they don't have jobs, or they don't have, like, they live in a hut with a dirt floor and their kids are outside playing with a stick. And I don't know for sure if they're happy people, but they appear to be, family appears to be something that's really important. Simplicity is something that's sort of forced upon them, but they found a way to make it work for them. And I think that our lives get overcomplicated focusing on all these things and all these things that we think that we need to feel good. And even by things, I mean achievements. And like, it is a place of privilege to be able to go after your dreams, to be able to want to achieve more and more in your life. And to realize that, hey, like maybe I don't need all of these things that I think I need to feel fulfilled, and asking, what do I actually need to feel fulfilled, which is a hard question to answer. But just seeing the way that other people live really has made me think about that. And another thing is that just basic things we take for granted, like someone picks up our garbage, we don't have to burn our garbage. And we can just, when we take a shower, we can put our face under the water and not worry about getting sick. Like just so many things that we have that we take for granted. And I think that's actually why people like going camping, because it takes away some of these luxuries that you have and it makes you come back and appreciate them. So racing, especially somewhere that maybe you've never been before or that is less developed, really puts that into your view.
And would you say those races were more meaningful to you because of that?
Absolutely. Like there's, in mountain biking and in stage racing, there's prestigious races that you can do in a lot of places, but there's also races that are a little less prestigious, but maybe are in some of these places. And I actually choose to go to these places over some of the more prestigious races that might get me better sponsorships or might get me better media coverage, because it's really important to me to have a different lens on life. And those are the races and the travel that I remember the most. Like when I go to like Europe or somewhere in the States, it's like I remember the race, but I don't remember as much about the experience. And whenever I go to these other places, it just really does. It's really changed the way that I view myself and I view the world. And just you get to meet people that live in those places too. Like when I did that race in Haiti, it's the first and only mountain bike race that's ever happened there, and there's only 30 people. That's the smallest race I've done, and half of the people in the race were Haitian riders, and some of them were riding in like high top shoes and they're on these old bikes. And just seeing that they were out there was so inspiring. Like they're just out there doing it. They don't care. Like they don't need the fancy thing.
Not overthinking it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. So that what you're saying there relates to something I've been thinking about a lot lately. I just about a month ago when this comes out, had Ryan Holiday on the podcast, and his new book, Courage is Calling, Fortune Favors the Brave, is all about taking the big step, like taking steps to speak to what matters to you, to grow and to, take that opportunity to be who you are. And this is very much an example of that, what you said about taking these smaller trips, more meaningful trips, over doing the ones that chase the most sponsorship. I would love for you to, now most people listening aren't going to be in a position like you or I where they have sponsorships to lose, or they have opportunities to do things that could bring in money or product or anything. But I think everyone within their own life, we all have these courageous decisions that we could be making that aren't necessarily things that are going to change our lives forever, but could be big enough decisions to where they are taking a stand. So maybe it is that someone is choosing to speak up at a parents' conference to say, hey, I actually don't really agree with what we're doing here, right? Could we not find a way to add composting or something, what would you say to anyone listening who may not have a dilemma like yours in terms of where should I race, but might have some impact within their own lives that could really change things within their community, but hasn't really had the courage to do so yet?
I think that some people are ready to use their voice in that way, and other people aren't, or don't feel like they can use their voice in that way. And this is a big I'm taking this to another level, talking about, diversity and things like that. But if you're ready to use your voice, like ask yourself, what are the consequences if I don't speak up? And will I regret it if I don't speak up or do the thing? And a lot of times you do regret it if you don't do it. And that's because it's clashing with something that you fundamentally believe in. And it's just like, even if you're not somebody that does any type of event, like whenever you go to an event, the goal for me at least is to be proud of what I did. So if you're at a PTA meeting, if you're at, anything that is important to you, ask yourself, when I leave, am I going to be proud of my actions? And going back to those things that you can control, your attitude, your actions, and your effort. Am I going to be proud of those things whenever I walk away? And again, we talked about building confidence, and doing it little by little will help you feel more confident to keep speaking up and speaking up. But for some people, if they've never spoken up or advocated for themselves, to do it in a public space in a big room might just be too much for them.
Thank you to UCAN for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. I am using UCAN in my races this month. I have the New York City Marathon that I will be using the Strawberry Banana Edge as my primary fueling source during the race. And I also will be using Edge combined with the UCAN bars in my 50K just a few weeks later. That is how much I rely and trust UCAN to get me through these races, and also to give me a steady supply of energy with no sugar crashes, because that does not feel very good. Just to give you a little bit more information on Edge, Edge is the gel, I suppose, but it's this quantum leap in how athletes are going to fuel for sport. It's the first and only on-the-go training fuel that is powered by superstarch. It's going to put you in an ideal performance state by keeping your blood sugar stable, and it is yet another UCAN product that I can comfortably take without ever being concerned about stomach upsets. That is something that I definitely have worked through in the past with other brands, and I love that there is no concern with UCAN. I have been working for UCAN since 2013, as you likely know, and there is a reason that UCAN features in my fueling every single day, whether I am running or not. Now, friends, you as a Running for Real listener can get 20% off your order by going to ucan.co and using code TINAUCAN to get yourself 20% off your order. You can check out all the other options they have there, which I use every single one of them. And it's just a great place to go check out some things that will keep you fueled and keep your stomach happy and just allow you to go reach your potential, whatever that is on that day. Thank you again to UCAN. You can go to ucan.co and use code TINAUCAN.
But for some people, if they've never spoken up or advocated for themselves, to do it in a public space in a big room might just be too much for them.
So true. Thank you for bringing that up, because that probably is something that I haven't spoken to enough. And yeah, you're right. People do need time to get to that point. And maybe their version of speaking up is saying to a family member, like, hey, I'm not okay with you saying that. And that's a really big deal. So I appreciate you saying that. Now, with the way that things are, with the changes that are going on, with the uncertainty of things, you mentioned earlier about optimism. How can we keep that optimism with as this is something you're passionate about, with the just kind of turbulence and aggression and anger and frustration that is going on right now? If someone finds themselves slipping into despair or just having a hard time staying optimistic, what would you say to that person?
I'd say that, first of all, don't beat yourself up if you do find yourself languishing or just having a hard time, because there are times where you do need to feel that way. Like, let yourself feel that way for a short period of time. And then ask yourself, like, what can I do? Because a lot of times we feel helpless. Like, there's a condition called learned helplessness. It's like why people stay in bad relationships and bad jobs and in situations, because they think that there's nothing that they can do. And then they continue to reinforce the fact that they think there's nothing that they can do. And then they just become helpless. So, like, what can you do, even if it's something really small, to help try to change your situation? And sometimes whenever we feel depressed about something really big, talking about the big picture again, it's because we feel like any action we take isn't going to make any difference whatsoever, because the issue is too big, or it's systemic, or it's beyond us. But really, making even the smallest change in your family or in your community, or even in the way that you educate yourself, does have a ripple effect, and it does make changes. It's like the compounding effect. 1% change compounds over time. But if you never even make a 1% change, then you're never even going to give that an opportunity to compound.
Oh, so true. And how do you apply that within your running or running, or for you mountain biking, but you also, as we've said, do trail run 3 to 4 days a week? How do you keep that optimism within that when it feels like running isn't going as you hope, or biking for you isn't going as you hope?
I mean, this is so common in both sports. Like, a lot of times I think people think that professional athletes are just amazing and they're kicking butt all the time. And that's really not the case. There's days where you want to quit and you don't want to show up. There's days and weeks where maybe you aren't doing very well. But just looking back for times where it was going well, or maybe just accepting that, hey, like right now, I just have to accept where I'm at, or maybe I might need even a little bit of extra rest. And if I can just stay the course, it's going to get better. And, that's happened. You have to prove it to yourself, though. Like, you can't just tell yourself that. You have to prove it to yourself. And it's really hard when you're proving it to yourself for the very first time.
Yes, so true. So anything else you would add for someone who does feel that they haven't typically been very good at proving to themselves in the past?
Yeah, I would say start even smaller. Like, record what your daily wins are, even if it's the smallest little thing, because then you'll start looking for them and you can start building on them. And I admit, like, when there's times where I'm really struggling, like, I literally have a pad and paper next to my desk, because in my business, in my life, like, I deal with lots of rejection. I deal with lots of days where things aren't going well and I want to give up in everything that I'm doing. And recording those daily wins or those daily successes really helps keep me going whenever it gets really hard, because I can revisit those things and say, well, it feels like everything is falling apart, but it's actually not.
Yeah, that's so true. When I was a teenager and having, a tough time figuring out who I was and what I contributed to the world, I would write down on little strips of paper, like either things that were good or things that I'd done, or it'd be like, my grandma loves me or whatever. And I would like put them into this little jar. They like all little individual pieces of paper. And when I was feeling less than confident about myself, or something had happened and I felt sad, I would like pull one out and be like, yeah, that's true.
That's amazing that you knew to do that.
Yeah, I suppose it was. I don't know. I mean, back then it felt like it was a bit like self-obsessed, like that I needed. At the time, I think I felt a bit embarrassed about it, like that I was writing down all these things that were good. But yeah, I guess you're right that it is kind of unique for a teenager to have figured that out. I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah, and like one thing I just want to add about like some of these statements that you make to yourself about, you know, your ability or about the world, it's like a lot of times we make them permanent, like this is going to last forever, or we make them pervasive, like this affects everything. Or we make them personal, like I am a failure or I am a screw up, instead of, you know, I made a mistake this one time. Like a lot of times we focus on those things, but realizing that most things are temporary. Most things only apply to one local situation. And most things are not a personal vendetta against you. It's not defining who you are. Being able to separate those things, it takes practice and like journaling and perspective to do that. But that can really help you create some distance between really difficult thoughts and emotions, to help you at least put it in perspective that this isn't going to be a permanent thing.
I would love to dive into that a little bit more with you and I, particularly as both of us are highly driven, have, you know, been successful, have reached the top level of our sport. You mentioned that you've been working through kind of the attachment that you have to your sport and the attachment to accomplishments. And you and I are very much, the talking that we've done over the past few weeks and months is very much showing we're in a similar place. And people can go check out the episode of me going on your podcast as well, the Sonya Looney Show. Is that called show?
Yep.
Or just podcast? Yeah. So people can go listen to that. But how have you been? Tell us a little bit about the journey of untangling that identity piece from what you've achieved.
Well, I'm still on the journey, forever on the journey. There's a few things that I'm currently working through. Like, I've really had to face this head on because I had my son March 15th, 2020. So the very beginning of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And we still don't have childcare. Like, we moved somewhere where it's almost impossible to get childcare because it's a small town and everybody has kids, and also discomfort with all the things happening in the pandemic. So I haven't been able to achieve things like I was achieving before I had my son. And I wanted to be that example. Like, look, you can do everything and have a kid, but you need to have the support in place to do that. So for me, I've had to face that head on. Like, well, what's happening? Because now I'm not achieving things. Like, I'm achieving things, but the rate of achievement has slowed down dramatically. And what does that mean?
Yes.
And like, so I asked myself, well, does it actually make a difference for me to work so hard, burn myself out constantly, maybe even forget, lose some of the experience because I'm rushing so much? Like, why do I need to achieve stuff at this rate? And then I asked myself, what am I trying to feel? Like, whenever I'm trying to achieve something, what am I trying to feel? And a lot of times those two things are not the same thing. Like, I'm trying to feel at ease. I'm trying to feel like I'm enough, but achieving something doesn't actually make me feel that way. It's like the hungry ghost. Like, when I achieve, I just want to achieve more. And the goalpost just keeps moving further and further. And that achievement isn't enough.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know that at all, so we can't relate. I'm just kidding. I could have said that myself. You just basically said all that I'm working through too, which you already knew because I told you that before we started recording. It's hard to, and as you said, the goalposts keep moving. And even if runners listening on feeling that maybe that extreme examples of what you and I have, I think it still applies on a different level. I mean, it's very easy for you and I to forget the things that we've done and be so far looking ahead that things that someone listening might think are absolutely would be a dream come true are like, well, that was fine, I'm moving on to the next thing. But within their own life, there's probably someone who looks to them as what they are doing as impossible. So maybe it's someone in your family who's always wished that they could run, and has always secretly wanted to do it. And they see you building up from a 5K to a 10K to a half marathon to a marathon. And they think, wow, like I could never do that. Like I've always wanted to try running, but I could never do that. So it is very much a relative thing. And I was saying to you before we started recording, like for me personally, I feel like there's something from when I was growing up that made me feel that way, that I wanted to keep achieving. And for you, obviously, there's some element of where that came from for you. But, you said you have your son Bradley now. How do you work on not instilling that in him as you move forward with, raising children?
I think this goes back to what we're talking about being proud of your effort. A lot of times, like for me personally, it was, you need to get straight A's, or you got an A. Why isn't that an A plus? Or I thought that if I worked harder at everything, especially in high school, if I could just be the best at everything, then people would accept me, because I wasn't one of the cool kids. I was one of the kids that got picked on a lot. And I really thought that if I just kept working harder, people would accept me. But that didn't actually happen. So I think that that's where that comes from for me. So I think it's like, for raising my son, it's always helping him be proud of what he's doing for the sake of the action itself, not because he's trying to get approval from somebody else. And that's like, it's impossible to not care what other people think and to not want to be accepted, because that's what we're human beings. But it's having a different relationship with that. And I don't have like a solid answer because I haven't done it yet, but that's sort of the approach that I'm going to take, is just being like, hey, like what you're doing is enough. And I'm going to love you no matter what. I don't care what your achievements are. And that's hard, because I think a lot of us do feel like people will love us more if you achieve more. And again, it's also coming back to the people who are closest to you in your life, because in the media, guess what? The media does love you more when you achieve more. Like you don't ever hear anybody writing an article or giving props to somebody who got second or third place. It's always about the win. But there can only be one winner, and that doesn't negate everything that this other person did or who they are. So like detaching the thing that you actually achieved from the person that you are two different things. But it gets really convoluted whenever you get all of that positive reinforcement whenever you are doing things well, and when you get no attention whenever you aren't doing things quite as well.
So true. So then what do you hope you can teach him in terms of, challenging himself and what he sees in you as a woman? I mean, I take it you want to raise an empathic and loving and respectful towards women little guy. So what do you hope that he does learn from what he sees his mum doing?
Well, number one, I hope that he respects women, and he doesn't think like women are good for a girl. And that women can be strong and powerful and intelligent and go after their dreams, like number one. And number two, like, I really hope that he feels that just doing things to grow is better than doing things to get an achievement. And sometimes you get both in the same package, but really being focused on like having that growth mindset for him, and the way that I give praise, like, oh, you try, like I actually focus on that now. When I see him working at something, if he gets it, I won't just only celebrate that he got it. I'll say, hey, like you spent a lot of time working at that. Great job. Instead of you got it.
Yes. Yes. Do you find that hard to get out of? Like, it's so instinctual to be like, good job, or like, good catching, or whatever it is. Like, I find it really hard to focus on the effort, because it's been so ingrained in my brain to say good job, or like, you did it. Yeah. Like the things that we're trying not to say as much as possible.
Yeah, it definitely is hard.
Yeah. Okay. So just wrapping up here, as you've progressed through your career and as you have had running be a part of your life during this, I'm assuming this entire time?
Yeah, like running is something I've just started doing again regularly in the last like 8 months. But running is something that has been weaved in, in my off season or whatever. And I've always identified as a runner because that's how I started in endurance sports, and running changed my life. Like it's how I found confidence in myself. I changed the way I carried myself. So yeah, like that's deeply embedded in who I am.
I love that. And So what is it that you would like? Is there anything else you would like to say to any runners listening out there who have been inspired by your words and just are maybe feeling a little like they're plodding along and need a little kick of motivation? What would you tell them?
I'd say don't be afraid to explore your curiosity, even if nobody approves of it or like around you or nobody understands it, because if you have the courage to explore your curiosity, and I really want to read this Ryan Holiday book because I just used the word courage, but just have the courage to explore even just a little bit, just dip your toe in, because it could literally change your entire life. Like I've seen it happen for myself. I've seen it happen for so many people. And we all just want to feel satisfied. We want to feel happy. We want to feel a sense of well-being. And you can do that with whatever you're doing. But I really do think that if you have the courage to explore that curiosity, to just open a door or to try an opportunity that comes your way that sounds interesting, you're going to learn so much. And even if it doesn't turn into a big thing, you're still going to learn so much.
What about if someone is saying, but that thing, I don't know if I'll be any good at it. What if it's surrounded by people who are good and I'm the one that doesn't know anything? What'd you say there?
I would say there's it's not my quote, but it's be brave enough to suck at something new. Like you're not going to be good at it to start, and nobody is good at something to start. And the beauty of that is that you get to see improvement a lot easier than if you were already really good at it. So just focus on the joy of getting better and the joy of just seeing that, because there is a lot of fun in getting better at something, but it requires getting started, even if you're bad at it.
Yes, so true, which is terrifying. But as you said, so worth it. And it is pretty cool to see it come together and how much you improve. I mean, when we've been doing something for a long time, which many listeners probably have with their running, you forget, yes, it's terrifying to start something new, but you also get the benefit of coming along pretty quick. Whereas when you've been running for a long time or been a mountain biker for a long time, the gains are pretty small because you have been doing it for so long. So I love that suggestion. Sonya, I mentioned you have your show, the Sonya Looney Show. People can go follow you on social media. There's actually a TEDx that you did, which was really cool. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Anything else you would like to say to the listeners today, or anywhere else they can go find you?
No, I'm just really grateful to everybody for listening. And my website, SonyaLooney.com, which we actually are working on a new one that should be launched hopefully by the time this podcast is out. I just love to connect with people. And if there's something that I said that resonated, or even something that didn't resonate that I misspoke on, send me a message. I want to hear from you.
I love that growth mindset of yours. Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you and all that you do. And can't wait to hear what the listeners took from this episode, because I'm sure there was a lot.
Thank you, Tina. And thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I've learned so much from you.
Hi, friends. Just a quick message to say a big thank you to the Running for Real team. While I may be the face of Running for Real and the voice behind the podcast, there are a group of people who are working tirelessly to provide everything that runners could need within our community, to make our community stronger, better, and evolve and grow and learn from one another. We are working really hard to make Running for Real the place we believe it can be within our community. I just want to take a moment to thank everyone on our team. That is Victoria, Stacy, Sandy, Sally, Maria, Kelsey, Kat, Jeremy, and Erica. I appreciate each and every one of you and the hard work that you put in. Now let's get back to the show. I really enjoyed that. I always love getting to connect with other people who do other sports and have other passions, but also recognize the special the magic that is our sport. So that was a really cool interview, and I appreciate her for her time. I also was on the Sonya Looney Show myself. So if you want to go to the show notes, you can go listen to the conversation we had over on her show. That was also another great conversation. Now, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors, and that is Tracksmith. Tracksmith, we did have a code to get you $15 off your order of $75 or more. I did let you know that code was coming to an end because I found it really important that we switch our code to a giving code. This has been in the works for about a year now, and I'm really excited that now if you make an order through the link in this podcast, or if you use code TINA15, it is going to give 5% of your order is going to go to Runners for Public Lands, which is a non-profit that is doing amazing things within the running community. I'm really proud to be able to support them. And so thank you to Tracksmith for sponsoring and for giving that money to a non-profit that so thoroughly deserves it. I also want to take a moment to thank UCAN. I will be using UCAN in the marathon this weekend. I will be taking exclusively UCAN products as my fueling source. Excited about the strawberry banana edge gel, which is what I will be using. You can get 20% off your order by using code TINA UCAN at ucan.co, or you can go to ucan.co/TINA to go check out that offer directly. Now, next week, we will be having a special bonus together run. Actually, I'm not sure that is going to come out by next Monday, but we will have a bonus together run coming maybe a few days late that is going to get to where you will get to experience the New York City Marathon weekend vibe. So we're going to try that out and see what you think. But in the meantime, my friends, have a wonderful weekend. Be sure to check out the New York City Marathon watch-a-thon that Running for Real is putting on, and we will see you next Friday.